Welcome back to 3D Dialogue. I'm Jesse Hirsch. Internet dating has increased in popularity fairly steadily over the last decade. Recently, with the growth of explicitly religious dating sites, singles now have the option of searching for someone within their own faith, who shares more than just the desire to meet a mate. Here to tell us more about this is Sam Moorcroft, president of RealCafes.com, Inc. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, perhaps we'll start by clarifying, what is the relationship between Real Cafes, Inc. and the subsidiaries that you run?
RealCafes.com is the parent company of two dating sites, ChristianCafe.com and JewishCafe.com. And we started ChristianCafe.com back in 1998. I was Christian and single. I'm still Christian, but no longer single. And that was a site that I focused on. I knew a lot about because I could understand the frustrations of being single and Christian and wanting to meet somebody from my own background. So that's the site we came up with. But along the way, I knew there were other groups of people of faith where it was important to meet someone from their own background, and hence JewishCafe.com was launched 2 years later.
And has there been quite a positive response to these sites? Have there been a lot of people using them to find
Tremendous. People who, where it's not as important to them, the background from a faith perspective, would go to Match or Yahoo Personals or American Singles or whatnot. But if it's important for you to meet someone where it's, in some cases, they will not marry someone who's outside their faith, then sites like ChristianCafe.com and JewishCafe.com are very important.
Now, do you find that there are people who perhaps abuse the system? I mean, certainly with the internet, there's always been the issue of verifying someone's identity and making sure that they are who they are. How do you deal with that problem in terms of ensuring that people are actually talking with someone who shares their faith?
Well, I mean, ultimately, you can't. I mean, if it's the internet, it could be a 12-year-old kid pretending he's a 35-year-old woman, but I think you're going to tell based on how they're writing to you, how they filled out the answers to the questions we asked them. Concerning both websites, we asked them to describe their faith or their background and what's important to them, and you can tell pretty quickly when you're looking at someone's profile, is this person genuine or not? And then subsequently, if you're writing to them, you get a pretty good idea.
Now, you mentioned yourself that you started this when you were single and looking for other people, and you mentioned that you were no longer single.
That's correct.
Is there, let's say, a greater match rate or a greater rate in which people, let's say, reach marriage when they're doing faith-based dating rather than traditional non-faith-based dating?
That'd be difficult to say. We don't have any statistics. I don't know that the major sort of secular websites would publish those either. We can only tell when someone's had a match if they write to us, because once they leave our website, for whatever reason, we don't pursue them. If they elect not to be on it, we don't necessarily know the reason, but we do get tremendous amounts of testimonials, so clearly it's working for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people.
Can you perhaps give a few examples of those testimonials? Like, what do people tell you in terms of their response or their joy even at finding their mate online?
People write paragraphs we have to constantly edit down, but basically they say that if it wasn't for what you guys were doing, I never would have met my soulmate, Miss Right or Mr. Perfect. And this person is deeply into their faith, whether it's their Christian faith or their Jewish heritage. It's very important to them and to me, and thank you so much for what you've done. And that's very rewarding.
Now, I mean, can you give us any sense of numbers of how many people use this service? Like, how many people, let's say, in a yearly basis or even a monthly basis would seek out others of the same faith? Do you find that this is a very popular phenomenon?
I'd say it's tremendously popular. One of the beauties of the internet is it allows you to segment. So previously, if you were looking for somebody, where you're going to meet them in a club, you're going to meet them in a restaurant, a laundromat, a social function, you never really know if they have the same background. Whereas the internet allows you to segment, so you can go onto a site like ChristianCafe.com or JewishCafe.com, already half the battle's won because you know that the people on that website share your background. So right away, you've got that part done. The rest is up to you, and presumably that the people that, if they're interested, will write back. But at the end of the day, I think it's much more successful than going to say, and not to slag my secular competitors, but if I'm on Match, if it's important to me that someone is, say, Christian or Jewish, how am I going to know? Because I'm sorting through millions of profiles. From the Christian perspective, I'm sorting through people who call themselves Christian, but that means so many things to so many people. So you could be born in Anglican or born Catholic, but you don't go to church, you have no affinity whatsoever, but that's considered to be Christian.
And do you have that level of specification within your site, let's say in terms of the Jewish,
Certainly.
whether they're Reform or Orthodox, or in the Christian, whether they're Anglican or Catholic?
Right. Yeah, certainly. In fact, you can go on, depending on the level of your background and your commitment, you can find anybody. So whether you're going from someone who's Jewish and they're just culturally Jewish all the way to Orthodox, you can certainly find that within the Christian community. You can go everything from nominally Christian all the way to I'm on fire and Jesus is the only one and only, etc. And he means everything to me. You'll find someone who'll fit that background.
And are there geographic or, let's say, age tendencies that tend to outweigh others? Like, are there, let's say, people who are more in large cities or people who are explicitly of a certain age segment rather than others? Or is there a broad diversity?
Well, probably we reflect the demographics of the general population. Most of our members are American, number one, followed by Canadian, and then we'd probably have UK, Australia, New Zealand, etc. But I'd say they run the range. The ones that are more serious tend to be 30 plus. If you're in your 20s, presumably if you're still in college or university, you've kind of got your pick, or at least you're at that stage where you're casual, you're not as much into long-term relationships. And both these websites are for people who primarily want to settle down and find that special someone. So the older they get, maybe their choices are more limited because your life gets busy, or you're going to meet them at work, or you're going to meet them at the synagogue or your local church. Well, beyond that, where are you going to go? You don't want to meet people necessarily in bars or pubs or restaurants, etc. Not because those are negative places, but those are not the types of places typically that someone from both those backgrounds are going to look for a soulmate.
And certainly, you know, congregations, certainly Jewish shuls and synagogues do have Jewish singles events, and I would assume that Christian congregations also have similar functions. Do you see this as in competition with those, or facilitating and augmenting those types of
I'd
forums?
say they're complementary, because people on our websites are not necessarily on because they can't find someone in the quote-unquote real world. They're online because it's an alternative to meeting someone. And will it work? Well, who knows? It's a numbers game, but if you're making yourself available, whether it's in the synagogue or a Christian singles group, like in the real world, and you're doing it online, it's like applying for a job. People don't sit at home and wait for the phone to ring. You have to get out there and make yourself available.
And I assume that because you're here today and we're speaking to you, that this has been a fairly successful business, and that in fact you have had a lot of interest in people using the service. Is that correct?
We've been doing this for a lifetime in terms of the internet. Like I say, we started this back in '98, so we're coming up to, what's that, almost 8 years now. So from a business perspective, it's certainly worked for us, and I think primarily because we focused on the niche markets. All the generic guys are losing money. Big sites, they just...
But because you guys have been specific, it's been
We've
successful.
been specific, we're almost more, yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in today. It's been a pleasure having you discuss these aspects. That was Sam Moorcraft, president of RealCafes.com Inc. We'll be right back to tell you how you can share your thoughts and comments with us. You're watching 3D Dialogue.